How do I get out of here? I'm not sure how many times I have had to answer this plea when a visitor enters our building. To those unfamiliar, our hallways and stairwells are pathways to the mysteries of Prairie Avenue. Many times the guest ends up using the elevator, then being rather surprised by landing on level 1, and level 1 is not the exit to the parking lot. That's EL, which I presume means entrance level or entrance lobby in the elevator buttons. How do I get out of here? Oftentimes I have jokingly said, by baptism and tithe. But often I have simply said to our guest, this building is really confusing. Let me show you the way. The Apostle Paul probably was having the same thought as he is left in Athens. Now, while he was born in Tarsus, a Greek-Roman provincial capital in Cilicia, just 12 miles from the Mediterranean Sea, Paul spent most of his life in the capital of Judea, Jerusalem, the dominant Jewish city in the world. Athens is about as far away from Judaism as a Gentile could approach the Jerusalem temple. The cultures mingled throughout the eastern part of the Roman Empire, but it was an uncomfortable co-living where Paul embraced one God. The Greeks and Romans embraced not only the ancient gods of Zeus, Athena, and Hermes, Jupiter and Mercury to us, but imported many of the foreign gods and built temples and altars and had priests for each one of them. And for that additional good measure, an altar is placed to an unknown God. But rather than hide or to simply be a traveler, tourist passing through, Paul in Athens continues his practice of at least trying to find a synagogue to gather in, or speaking about his beliefs in the marketplaces of Athens, where he is called a babbler, or someone who proclaims foreign divinities. In speaking of the death and resurrection of Jesus, he was being misunderstood. The Greek word for resurrection is anastasy. You might have heard this if you watched My Big Fat Greek Wedding, where the non-Greek groom is being coached by his Greek bride on the phrases for Orthodox Easter. Christos anastasi. Now, the philosophers and Gentile citizens of Athens thought Paul was saying the name of a new goddess, Anastasia, perhaps being the wife or the consort of this Christos figure that Paul kept talking about. Whether by misunderstanding or mere curiosity, Paul is able to draw enough interest to climb the Areopagus, or Mars Hill, a rocky outcrop that's not far from the Parthenon, with its statue of Athena, now some 500 years old, in view, to speak about this babbling, this Christos aneste. How do you share your foreign faith to a foreign audience? With all of its ever-present idolatry, it would be easy to speak about all the wrong things And certainly for Paul, as a Jewish believer, do you share the stories of Moses? No one that's in the gathering at Mars Hill is probably heard about Moses. Do you argue and oppose everything they do and live, or do you invite and persuade? Whether in the marketplace, or a religious temple, or even a public plaza, people encounter us while they are carrying the questions of life around them, or seek new points of view, or are simply searching for a sense of purpose and meaning. It may not be a time to condemn nor to criticize them, but rather it may be an opportunity to demonstrate true empathy. Paul is not sharing his faith in order to confront the Athenians. He offers his story to offer an answer among the other present responses and to reveal the essence of his answer. The speech at Mars Hill is remarkable in that it is the only one of the 3 sermons we have of believers in our New Testament. And it is the only sermon in the New Testament spoken directly to a group of non-believers. And it is non-condemning of whatever beliefs these non-believers are holding on to at the time. It provides an answer to seeking a life of purpose and meaning. And it reveals that God is not confined to the elements of nature, nor images we've made, or even our own gifted imaginations. Nor does this God reside in any of the temples made by human hands or served by human hands. From one ancestor, Paul proclaims, comes all the nations in all times and seasons. And our universal experience of searching for a God or gods through either investigation or experience tells us that God is not far from anyone. God is the quest of all lifetimes. And God can be found in that same quest. We are all children of God, and God's judgment is known and revealed by Jesus. And God's righteousness is assured by Jesus' resurrection. The resurrection tells us that love will have the final word about the meaning and purpose of life. Even when we lose our way, this God is near. So what quest are you on? What difference does the death and resurrection make on your life? And are you sharing its story with others who are yet searching, yet seeking, and having trouble seeing God in their midst? For we still live in a world that still has other gods seeking our allegiance. Now, they may not be called gods, but they are still housed in human buildings and served by loyal human hands. They may claim to provide purpose and meaning, but often they only demand to be fed for themselves and leave us hungry. Perhaps our sense of God's absence in our lives is because we simply do not access the already present in our lives, the out there, the in here, the within and without presence that is accessible to all who seek and search. Paul tells those that have gathered at Mars Hill that God is as far away as the farthest star and as near to us as our own drawn breath. The example of Jesus reminds us that we are now on a mission to seek and find the lost of God's own children and to bring them back home, to guide, to love, to serve, and to learn together with a way of life that is richer and nobler than the way we have set it to be for ourselves. This God we may love and seek may still be largely unknown to the people we meet, wherever we go. Or maybe this God is obscured by the baggage of what others have told them about Christians and their beliefs and their practices. Unfortunately, Christianity is filled with many bad examples and poor role models. Or it could be as simple as a misunderstanding, like the babbling of a word that sounds like a name when it really is a demonstration of God's purpose. My experience in encountering non-believers and skeptical critics of the faith has taught me that it is better to ask them about the God they question or simply don't believe in, rather than to condemn them for not believing, as I choose to believe. Tell me your story, and likely I will agree with the merit of their questions and their hesitation to embrace that form of God. I don't believe the greatest threat to our faith in any form or version of atheism. I think the greatest threat to our faith is indifference. The death and resurrection of Jesus Christ is the story of God for us to tell. Do we share it in our everyday lives, in the marketplace and public squares of our lives? Or is it under some form of witness protection? Yes, telling the story will cost you. And just reading a few verses further in our story, the verses 32 through 35, tells us how Paul's initial audience received this sermon. Some of them scoffed. Others were curious, come again and tell us more. And a few people joined. Some will continue to scoff today, and some will want to hear it again sometime. Some will join. But it must be seen, experienced, and felt. The door may be opened to just a crack or wide to receive, but it must be received. Why do you have the hope you have in life? And how can I, who haven't experienced this yet, can experience the power and presence of the resurrection today? Let me share my faith story with you. Let us build our faith together in sharing. Amen.